Welcome back to the Raising Our Vibration podcast, where we explore higher consciousness through spiritual practice. And today, Stephen and I are going to explore why who you think you are makes you suffer. So let's begin just by talking about what's the normal way that we think of ourselves. Okay, how would you define yourself? And so most people would start maybe with their name, right? And so I'm Kevin, I'm talking to Stephen. I might also identify who I am with my body, with my personal history, with my roles, my achievements, my relationships, with thoughts and feelings and beliefs and values that I hold. Okay, so that all seems so obvious, so self-evident, and so unproblematic. So today we're going to explore why it is extremely problematic and actually the source of all the suffering on our planet. Okay, so a big claim, but not without a great history of pointing to that fact and justification of it and evidence for it. I mean, well, if you want evidence for it, right, just look around. Just look around at the suffering in our world. That's enough evidence for it. So let's go into this. Let's inquire into this a little more deeply. And I'm going to begin by reading a few pages from our book, Raising Our Vibration. And if you have this book, we'll be on, let's see, pages 50 to 53. So let me begin with a quote from a book called What the Buddha Taught. What the Buddha Taught. According to the teaching of the Buddha, the idea of self is an imaginary, false belief, which has no corresponding reality. And it produces harmful thoughts of me and mine. Selfish desire, craving, attachment, hatred, ill will, conceit, pride, egoism, and a host of other problems. It is the source of all the troubles in the world, from personal conflicts to wars between nations. Okay, that's pretty all-pervasive. So if this sense of who we think we are is the source of all these problems, then what's another way to think of ourselves? What's another way to understand who we really are? So for a moment, consider that the self might be something like a function, a collection of inputs that combine to create a specific experience. In this sense, yourself is the result of the coming together of the genes of your mother and father, along with a host of other unseen forces, into a particular body at a particular time and place, in a particular culture or mix of cultures, on this planet, within this solar system, within this galaxy, and so on, ad infinitum. There is a whole ocean of forces that come together to create this wave called you, which is at some point on the journey from forming, rising into a crest, and dissolving into the ocean again. Now, you might not normally think of yourself as being so ephemeral and transient. You have this sense that who you are is more permanent, substantial, and enduring. At least you'd like to think you are. You, like all of us, have a strong attachment to this sense of self, to who you think you are. In fact, most of your life revolves around gaining and growing a more substantial and more enduring sense of self. You want to become more not less. And there are three dominant ways you grow your sense of self: doing, thinking, and having, in which will include collecting relationships, possessions, feelings, and experiences. So you identify who you are in three ways. One, with the things you do. The more you do and the better you do things, the better and more substantial you feel about this self you think you are, the doer. Two, with the thoughts you think. The better thoughts you think, the better you feel about this self, the thinker. One famous philosopher, René Descartes, went so far as to define the self solely by thinking, in his famous phrase, I think, therefore I am. Now, most of us identify who we are by the thoughts in our minds, by this narrative self, constantly commenting on and telling a story about what is going on inside and around you. So that's a second way you might identify who you are, with your thoughts. Or number three, by what you have. These include the feelings and experiences you have, and the memories you have of these experiences, the relationships you have, and the things you have. You like to accumulate more and more of these experiences, relationships, and things because they make your sense of self feel more substantial. The inner narrator then takes these things you have and tells elaborate stories about them. And you identify with these stories of who you are. You have a story about you. So according to the Buddha, the problem with the sense of self you grow by doing, thinking, and having is that all of these are impermanent. No matter how substantial your achievements, thoughts, or collections of things, experiences, and relationships, in time, they all fade away. No matter how much you want these things you identify as me to endure, they don't. They, like your body, are born, remain for a while, and die. They are all impermanent, like waves in the ocean of life. So if nothing you are in the habit of calling me endures, isn't this scary? According to the Buddha, it's only scary if you remain attached to this idea of self. When you let this go, it's nirvana, liberation. It's possible to suspend this self-function and realize a peace beyond measure. In meditation, inner sensations, subtle energy, and still, silent, spacious awareness stimulate and point to a transcendent experience beyond self that comes to the fore with such focus, intensity, depth, and breadth that it is undeniably more beautiful and compelling than the activity of the world of the narrative self. And when this happens, the self function loses its luster, deactivates, and dissolves. The self function is transmuted, so it is no longer strongly identified with and attached to. It is no longer the motivating and driving force of activity. Instead, it is like a costume, a set of clothes you put on to play in the world of forms. Life itself is the actor, the doer of all actions, the thinker of all thoughts, the feeler of all emotions, the one who has experiences. This liberation from identification with the self changes everything. Changes everything. This is so fundamental and powerful and revolutionary to recognize, and not to conceptualize, but to feel, have a felt sense, a felt understanding and embodiment, that it completely changes our experience of life. And that's what we're always trying to point to in these podcasts and in the meditations on the ROV meditation app, in this book, Raising Our Vibration, and in this podcast, where we share these insights, but also guide you into a practice that points to you experiencing this yourself. So, Stephen, I know you just came back from a whirlwind trip through Europe and the Middle East, where you were doing a lot of guiding with specific people and families, and just pointing them to this awareness and to awakening this recognition. So I'll pass over to you. Maybe there's some experiences you want to share, and then I know there's a simple practice that you're going to guide us in to point us into this experience itself.
Thank you, Kevin, and love and blessings to everybody. And I thought it'd be useful, Kevin, to have a little bit of a dialogue on this, just in terms of the practices and the guidance that we've both given people over the years. So you mentioned a number of things that are incredibly important and that the Buddha has mentioned too. And the beginning part is about the view itself, that if you have a view of life and yourself that this is it and I've got to get on and do it and I is the important part, then you actually start to operate and live from that view. And you believe that everything that you do and say and all the stories you've told about yourself are fundamentally true, and you attach yourself to them. And there's another side that I know both you and I touch all the time, and that is that what if we were to be open to the infinite possibility of what lies beyond the self? So when we're operating from I, we go throughout our day from that point of view. And what if we were, and which is very contracted, obviously, it's just a little tiny part. If you consider the universe, then we're speaking the really, really tiny part of the universe. So what if the view were beyond that identity, and we just simply relax back into the possibility that there is an open view that we haven't explored, and that is infinite and beyond this.
Absolutely.
So that's
it's like going through life, well, not even like that, but kind of like this, right? Thinking this is that what we're experiencing is who we are and the way things are, right? And really we're just experiencing an infinitesimal sliver of the vast awareness that we are, because we're so identified with this small limited sense of self that we've been talking about.
Exactly. So that's the view that we take is a really crucial part of how we relate to the world. So if we have a view that we're expansive and open and infinite, we are actually in every moment going to relate to what happens around us in a different way than if we say it's all about me and I do this and I do that and all my stories are true and therefore dictate everything that happens. So that was the first part. The second part I wanted to just discuss with you was about the letting go part. First, we've come to an understanding that the view is pretty important. If we're contracted and looking through that tiny lens, we'll operate from that tiny lens. Now, so how do people let go of the tiny lens? Because that's often a major consideration. I think, and you mentioned, the travels that I've been on, time and time again, I would get the same question or the same statement in question. One, I'm really stressed. Two, how do I let go of all the stress? Because it seems monumental. If you're listening to this and you're feeling like, oh, wouldn't I love to know the answer to that question? Because I've got so many things. I've got kids, or I haven't got kids. I've got a relationship I'm struggling with. Or I've got money problems. I've got too much, too little. I don't know what I'm doing with money, or my health struggling, or it's up, it's down. I don't know how to deal with multiple things that are happening in my body, or I've no idea of my life purpose, or I don't know what my spiritual path is, or I've got even no idea if there's any support, or I feel alone, right? All those things, any one of those can really confound you. And equally, a number of those put together can seem very extremely challenging. So if we go from that simple view that we're open and infinite, the question of how to let go is a really crucial one, because in a sense, you're saying, all right, I hear you, Stephen Kevin, there's a view that I'm infinite, but how do I let go of the finite part that I've been in a habitual pattern for years? And one of the things that I've found incredibly useful, again, in working with people over a number of years, and particularly in the last, month or so, is the letting go. A lot of you who are listening will relate to the word surrender, right? If we kind of give up, and a lot of spiritual teachers across the ages have talked about giving up. Oh, people often think that means giving up my things, right? But
Feels like you're losing something, right? And something that you don't want to lose.
exactly. Like, oh my goodness, I'm not only going to have to give up my house and possessions, but but this thing that I'm holding on to, the bit of me that is the main reason why I'm here on the planet, I've got to give up that too. And I'm curious some of the ways that you find it easy to let go, because one of the ways I've found very simple is, if you consider a time in your life when you've been able to let go or surrender, and this can be really simple, like a time when you were a kid and you played out in nature. I remember playing down the back of my house with some friends, and we used to climb this particular tree, and it was an old willow tree, and I'd just sit up there in the branches, and that I can remember it vividly, and it was just so beautiful. Nothing mattered, right? There was, and so that's often what I ask people to consider first, because we have a feeling often from childhood, teenage years, even adult years, where something kind of just flowed, and suddenly the whole, all the things that we're grasping onto, or that feel like they're attaching themselves to us, no longer really matter. So I noticed that was another experience that people often could feel into, was just a really simple moment sometime in their life, because we still hold those body memories. The body's really an amazing technology. It is the most amazing technology on the planet, and it actually holds those memories of what it means to let go or surrender. So I'm curious about the a way or a practice given that you've found helpful in terms of surrendering.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first, just that insight that the stress we experience comes from the view we're taking, right? Just that insight. If we think we're experiencing things the way they are. And so when we realize that, no, we're experiencing things the way we're looking at them, right? That everything that we experience is the result of our relationship to it, what we're focusing on and how we're relating to it. And that's then the second thing. If we realize that it's all about our view and how we're relating to the view, then to me, insight has a great capacity to help us release. Because when we see something clearly, when we realize something, I have an aha that, oh, all this stress I'm experiencing is my creation. It's because I'm looking at things in a specific way, and then I experience them that way. And every experience we have is like that. So I think insight itself can just help us to let go a little bit. And then the second thing, which you touched on, is having a glimpse, a moment of experience that's beyond that, right? That's like, it could be remembering a childhood experience when you just felt open and free and you looked at the sky or the moon or the stars and you're just like, oh, you just have that awe and wonder, and that sense of self drops out and you just know that you are a part of all this, right? That you just have this openness of experience that's just natural. And so maybe that's the other thing that I think is so crucial, is to realize that there's a natural, unobstructed, unveiled experience that is always available underneath all this tumultuous, stressful experience that we have, that actually what we're talking about is here right now. It's not a place we need to get to. It's not a matter of having a certain level of skill at meditation or doing a certain rigorous practice for years and years. It's always available as that within which every experience arises. This awareness that we are, we wouldn't have an experience of stress if we weren't this open awareness within which stress arises, and pleasure and happiness and birth and death. All of that arises within that vast awareness that we are. So this awareness is ubiquitous. It is the source of every experience. So every experience is accompanied by, illuminated by, made known within awareness itself. And we just get focused on the experience itself and forget that which is giving rise to the experience, which is something you can't describe according to language, which is about describing objects, right? So it is discovered in silent awareness, in when we can let go of all the chatter and all the preoccupation with me and just rest in a natural openness. It's so simple and so available and so here that we miss it.
Beautifully said. And in fact, that's a beautiful segue into doing a practice, Kevin, a very simple one, because I know, and I'll describe to you as you're listening, everybody here, that what we're going to do, and Kevin might have a comment to make about this open spaciousness, because as Kevin says, it's always available. And in fact, you are always aware. In a sense, that natural awareness is actually your natural state. It's just that you've believed for a long time you're something else. And so the way that I'm going to do it, which is so very simple, is as you start to become aware, and sometimes the very simplest thing to become aware of is the easiest way to begin, is if you listen to sounds in your environment. And right now I have an air conditioner going in my room, because in Japan it's very hot and the temperature is very high, very humid. It feels like I'm swimming, Kevin, through a very thick soup most of the day. And instead of when you become aware of something, instead of going out to it and saying that's the sound of the air conditioner, you just simply become aware of sounds. So it's almost, you can bring a sense of playfulness to your awareness, to your senses, and just rest. And you allow, and Kevin you mentioned this about the arising, abiding, and dissolving. You let the sounds come, like a bit like waves in the ocean. They just come, they go for a while, by it. Even the sound of the air conditioner, you will be aware that sounds that have a consistency in the atmosphere, you will often not notice them. Right. So when you've got something that's going for a long time in terms of sound, there's a certain point where you actually it drifts into the background. It's a really good example of
Like
what happens,
awareness itself,
like
right?
awareness itself. Exactly. Exactly.
Since it's always happening, we don't recognize it.
That is such a fantastic insight, Kevin, because that is exactly it. It's because it's so present and it's so obvious and it's so simple. We just don't notice it at all. So we'll do that with sound and we'll do that with body. So when you listen to a sound, I always make this funny joke, and when I was traveling, I made the same funny joke. I'd say most people, for example, in very hot, in very hot countries, people have air conditioners going. So I just say, you're aware of the sound, right? And they go, oh yeah, of course, yeah, but I just don't notice it. Like you said, Kevin, it disappears. And then I'd say, okay, you do know that it's there. Are you an air conditioner, right? When you hear that, do you say to yourself, well, I'm an air conditioner because I can hear it? And they go, no, of course not. So, and then you make the immediate parallel, say, okay, can you think of thought of your breakfast or even of your relationship you're having difficulty with? Yeah. Are you the thought? Well, clearly not, because you're aware of once you start to drop into this, you can be aware of sounds and then switch to being aware of thoughts. And you're not the sound and you're not the thought. Now that really simple aha is because then you realize, and if I actually look closely at my thoughts, like the sound of a bus comes and goes, and the sound of my thoughts come and go, or the movement of my thoughts come and go. And yet, for some reason, we don't identify with being a bus, but we do identify with our thoughts. And that's a very powerful insight, because you start to realize that what you've grabbed onto, it's not consistent. Otherwise, we would grab onto everything as being us. And in fact, that we'd get the opposite, because we'd suddenly become the birds and the stars and the sky and the wind, because we'd actually recognize that from that sense, we are everything and we're also nothing. That the possibility that awareness might be our real natural state is so wonderful. So yeah, Kevin, before I dive into this, I'm curious if you have any insights about, easy ways for people to touch on that awareness. Because I know from your desert experience, for example, I mean, you go naturally to that open, spacious experience itself directly,
Yeah,
if not all
yeah.
the time.
I mean, right. It's something that was so profound for me that it left an indelible kind of impression that is easy to return to, but also that cultivated over the last 40 some years. But I think that recognition, I am aware of that, is a great starting point. Like you said, to where if you say just pick an object out in front of you, and like I have this webcam over my computer screen, it has a blue dot right at the top of the center. And if I look at that, so pick an object in your environment, if you're listening or watching, and just look at that. And you're aware of that, right? Right. So there's a knowing that you are aware of that. So anything that you are aware of is not you, it's out there. So just be aware that you are aware of that object and notice what it does when you're aware of being aware of that. And now be aware of the one who's aware. Is be aware of awareness itself. So there's a felt sense of that. It's very subtle. It's a shift that you make from first I'm focused on the object, then I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that. And then I'm aware of awareness itself. I'm aware of that within which this object arises, awareness itself. And you might notice there's a subtle feel to that. And you can inquire into that once you're aware of awareness itself. You can inquire into that. Feel, is there any boundary to awareness itself? No, there's no boundary. Does it begin or end? No, it just seems to be there. Yeah, so that's something we can very simply do. Oh, and now I have this ring in my imprinted on
Yes,
on my on my looking at you. You
that's
are now
funny.
surrounded by the ring of my webcam light.
I like that.
It's
I'm
now
a, I'm
imprinted.
a, I'm a ring of light. That's funny. I love that, Kevin.
But that's
Love
a
that.
really simple thing we can do is just being aware of something, a sound, an object, and then being aware that we're aware of that, and then being aware of awareness itself. Um,
Love
and
it.
there, you can feel those subtle shifts if you really pay attention, right? It's just natural.
Absolutely. And so I'll dive into this little practice now. And what I'm going to do is take you into that from what Kevin has guided you into already. And that is that you can be aware of the awareness itself, or let's say aware of the knowing of seeing. And you can also be aware of the knowing of hearing. And you can also be aware of the knowing of thinking. And there's one consistency, that that awareness itself. That awareness, which, as Kevin said, is unbounded, is actually consistently present throughout. So there's presence. So it is a very simple practice. So we can do that. You can do this eyes open, eyes closed. Sometimes it helps to shift between the eyes open and eyes closed practice because you kind of test it out. Because people often say, well, okay, I've done these practices, but how do I bring this into my everyday life? So I'll do it very simply, as Kevin's done, with eyes open and eyes practice. So let's try closing our eyes first and keep this ever so simple. And that is that every moment is an opportunity to be aware of awareness itself, just as Kevin guided you. So you have the good fortune of already being aware of the knowing of seeing. And so here we're going to bring our awareness to hearing. Just noticing what sounds are present in your awareness. So this could be anything, like me, the air conditioner. Could be for you car noises, dogs, other human beings speaking, conversations. Just notice these sounds. You don't need to focus on them. You're just viewing them as waves. They're just sounds. There's just a general open appreciation of sound. And you're resting as this open expanse of pure awareness and allowing the experience of hearing to happen, to flow, to rise and abide for a while and flow. So there's just an awareness of sound. Comes, it goes. And you're just resting as this knowing of sound. And there's a certain flavor, as Kevin mentioned, to this knowing, because you're resting as this knowing. It's so easeful, peaceful. If there's even a shred of effort, you drop that. Don't need to control it. You're just allowing hearing to happen. Open, effortless. While you rest as this knowing of hearing. Right? There's a beautiful sense of just being present to sounds as they come and go. And the knowing of those sounds, and then the awareness of that knowing. It's like, oh, I can know sound. And then be aware of the felt sense, the experiences that are happening in your body. Just notice what's happening. Again, you don't need to grab onto any of them. You're just simply noticing sensations in the body. So you notice how you've switched your knowing of hearing into just knowing of felt sensations that are present. It's really simple. You're just feeling anything. So I can feel at the moment in my calves, there's sensations. I've just been on the rebounder, so there's a sensation in my legs, right? It's just a knowing, again, of body sensations. They're just simply experiences that are happening, unfolding in this open awareness. It's kind of like your body's just happening within this vast awareness. And the sensations just come and go like waves, just rising, abiding for a while, disappearing. So you'll notice, right? Your knowing of body sensations moves from, perhaps mine's moving from my calves up to my arms. It's just easeful. Just like being aware of different sections of the ocean. You're relaxing into this full open awareness. So there's a knowing of the body sensations. And you're just allowing that to unfold effortlessly. You don't grab onto anything, you're just allowing. Switch back a moment now to the knowing of sounds. Right? So I'm back with the sound of the air conditioner, the sound of people talking, the commotion in my neighborhood outside. There's just a knowing of that. And you know you are not the sound, right? You're just simply resting as that knowing. And you can be aware of the knowing of sound. And now switch back to the experience in your body. Feel into your body sensations for another moment. Right? There is a knowing of those felt sensations, just like there's a knowing of sound. And you know those body sensations, and equally you know you're not those body sensations, just like you know you're not the sound. And you can be aware of the knowing. Notice how there's that similar flavor or texture, that taste that Kevin was speaking about. There's like one taste or one texture to this awareness. Because you're getting familiar with awareness, which you might not have noticed up till now, but you're aware of the knowing of sound, and you're aware of the knowing of body sensations. Now, in the same way, bring your awareness to thoughts. And just for the purpose of this, it's often easier just to connect to a thought, say, of a neutral thought of what you had for breakfast or lunch or dinner. So you're just noticing what's happening in your mind without judgment or opinion. You're not paying attention to your thoughts as any object. You're just allowing them to arise while you rest as this knowing of thoughts as they arise. When you understand this, it's almost like the revealing of a deep knowing that you've had for a long time, that you're not your thoughts, and you can allow yourself to be the field of awareness while thoughts just happen. So you're remaining in this knowing of thoughts. So I've got this, I love blueberries. I always have blueberries with muesli in the morning. So there's this knowing of that thought. I can even taste it in my mind. I can see them. I can hear the sound of those luscious blueberries. Right? They're just thoughts. They arise. So let them arise. Let the thought of your breakfast or lunch or dinner arise within awareness itself, like waves. So I love the wave healing, right? Because they rise. Notice how there's different textures. And right now I've got blueberries. Now I'm pouring milk on. There's sounds, there's tastes. But they just arise. They flow. And then they dissolve back into awareness. And you're resting as the knowing of those thoughts, right? It's very natural. You don't need to make anything happen. It just happens. It's already happening. You're just recognizing the thoughts as they arise and abide for a while and vanish. And you're resting as this knowing of thoughts. And equally, you can be aware of this knowing of thoughts as they arise, and you're not the thoughts, because the thoughts are impermanent. They shift just like waves. So you can bring your awareness to the knowing of thought. How you can move back to the knowing of body sensations and feelings in the body. And be aware it's the same, that you're aware of the same knowing. And be aware of sounds. Be aware that it's the same knowing. And then, because Kevin has done this before, let's open up to the awareness of seeing. And so gently open your eyes. And just as Kevin did before, so you've already done the practice with Kevin, and now it's quite easeful just to open. You could look at the same object. You could look at a different object. Now you're just being aware of seeing. So you're just allowing the field of vision to rise. You're just relaxing. Relaxing as this knowing of seeing. Just relaxing into there, allowing the experience of what's seen to arise, to unfold naturally, while you're just resting as this knowing of seeing. Right? And there's the awareness of seeing is very powerful because we often go out to objects. It's such a strong pull on our senses. And here you're just resting as the knowing of, in this case, my computer. Right? I know I'm not the computer. You know you're not the object. Just as you're not your thoughts, you're not your body, you're not the sounds. So there's the same knowing. So here you're resting in the knowing of the seeing, Kevin knowing the ring light, whatever you happen to be looking at home. This is just a knowing of that with your eyes open. And again, you can be aware of that knowing. Right? The same knowing of seeing, So test it out, the same knowing of seeing. Close your eyes. Bring your awareness to sound. So there's the same knowing of sound. Bring your awareness to your body, your felt sensations. There's the same knowing, right? You're just shifting knowing to body sensations. And then bring that thought of breakfast, lunch, or dinner again. There's the same knowing. So you can be aware of that knowing of thoughts, of sound, of body sensations. And then slowly open your eyes again. And you can be aware of the knowing of seeing. So there's just a gentle resting. Key here is it's very gentle, it's very effortless, and there's just an allowing. Don't have to do anything. You're actually just resting as this knowing of seeing. So I know there's a computer. I'm resting as that knowing. And equally, I can be aware of that very subtle knowing that's constant. So you're just resting as this awareness of knowing, or this awareness of awareness itself. I just simply use knowing because it helps us to realize, oh, there is a knowing that's flowing throughout everything. And it's consistent, and you can be aware. So the last one, just because it's quite useful to do this, how about you bring that same knowing awareness, and it might help if you close your eyes this last time. Bring the knowing to the identity. So again, just notice the way that you have certain beliefs. Just bring a few of your beliefs to mind, right? But just be aware that they are just that. They're just beliefs or ideas. Maybe some ideas you have about the job you do, or who you are, or the role you play. Maybe as a husband, wife, partner, father, mother, friend. Right? Just become aware of all those roles and identities you play, and just become aware of some of the stories you tell people. These could be anything from how much you earn to how many kids you have to whether your health is good or bad. So just notice some of these repetitive stories that arise that you're telling. Right? Just be aware of them, just in the same way as you've been aware of sound. Just simply bring this knowing to your stories, your ideas, your concepts of self, your beliefs. You're just allowing them to arise, just simply noticing and bringing this knowing of identity, the knowing of I. Now, in the same way as you know you're not the body, and you're not what you see, and you're not what you think, equally you're not these stories, right? Because they change. If you think of a story you've been telling when you were a little kid, and equally stories you tell to other adults now, they change. So you are not those stories. You're not that identity. It's just a function. So, and equally you can know that. You can bring your knowing to that same knowing that you bring to sound. And you can be aware of this knowing. So what if you did put all of this aside? You're not the sounds, you're not what you see, you're not the feelings in your body, you're not the thoughts, you're not the identity, you're not your stories, you're not even your ideas or beliefs. What happens if you put all that aside and just rest in the knowing? So you drop all the control, rest in the knowing, and become aware of the knowing. Just as Kevin said, when you simply rest as the awareness of knowing, or the awareness of awareness itself, and you look for any boundary, any limit, You realize you can't find it through names or labels or concepts or ideas or beliefs. It's beyond names or labels. It's beyond all objects. So here you just dropping everything and just trusting in what's present that is beyond words or labels. So you just for a moment, you rest in not knowing. You're resting in awareness of awareness itself. You're resting in the awareness of knowing. So what lies beyond all that? Beyond form, beyond identity, beyond this or that, beyond names, beyond labels, beyond concept. As you rest like this, you may find yourself resting in a deep silence, just as Kevin has already mentioned. In the same way there's a knowing of sound here, there's a knowing of silence. And this knowing is limitless. You might have found that your body is very still and your eyes are very still. So equally, there's a knowing of stillness. Amazing. Body becomes very still when you become aware of stillness itself. It's something timeless and vast. It's always been present. Just as Kevin was saying, this limitless stillness, this boundless silence, peace. And in that silence and stillness, there is space. Vast space. Slowly open your eyes as this space. You're simply being this knowing. Space is quite accessible for all of us. Just simply resting as space feels so limitless, boundless. It's a very powerful portal to awareness itself. There's a freshness and openness and sense of gratitude, love, compassion, all of that. Is a delight. You might feel this moment like a young child because you're not focusing on anything. You're just resting as this knowing of openness, of the view, as we were talking about in the beginning. This openness, this infiniteness, this vastness. And then as you go about your day, you can move as this being, this vastness. When you need to engage, you can then very wisely bring identity, me, to do your teeth, to engage in conversation, to eat your food, without judgments, without labels. And you move as this vast openness. You know how to be wisdom of everything and nothing, of boundlessness, and then when it's necessary, of your identity. You can move in the world with freedom and grace and peace, love. So Kevin, I'll pass back to you.
Thank you, Stephen, for that beautiful pointing and guidance, that moving through life using identity without identification, right? Like you can think without being identified with the thoughts that flow through, or the feelings, or anything at all, right? This shift in our felt sense of who we are is ungraspable, undefinable, but undeniable. And it becomes very familiar as we turn toward it and just recognize it again and again and again until this is where we're living from. So thank you, Stephen. Thank you all for watching, for listening, and for participating with us. Thank you for your practice. And if you'd like more information on meditation and awareness practices like this, including the ROV meditation app, our Raising Our Vibration book, our communities of practice, you can visit us at raisingourvibration.net. And we'd love to hear from you there. Until next time, bye for now. Love and blessings.